and we'll make this full screen and we'll start. There we go. All right, so this is a slideshow that they showed us when I was a student here, and I thought it was pretty useful. Like maybe not all of the content that's in here is going to be completely pertinent to what we're doing, but at the same time, I still feel like it's useful to know and it's useful to go over. So this is just the standard resume galvanized career services slide. And so go to the next slide. Our objectives today are to discuss how resume reviewers consider the information on your resume, determine which sections of your resume you will include, organize your resume based on your unique experience or your background, recognizing common resume errors and cross-checking your resume for these mistakes. And we want to try and start updating our resume or even creating our resume, while we're in this cohort, as we're working through things and as we're, deploying projects, we want to make sure that we're updating our resume as such. So the top complaints about resumes are grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes, just any general blatant mistakes where you're like, come on, man, how did you miss that? Organization, making sure that the data or like the information that you have in your resume is in a nicely formatted way so that the recruiter or the interviewer, when they're looking at it, they know like within seconds exactly where they should look for the pertinent information. If you don't have it, subcategorized and it's just a big wall of text, it's not going to grab their eyes, first of all. And second of all, it shows that you're not exhibiting those organizational skills in your resume. How can we expect you to, exude organizational skills in a workplace environment? Pardon me. Let's get this over, huh? Okay. So yeah, substance and content, trying to figure out what fits and what doesn't. That's a huge key component as well. Whether you're a good fit for the job, and you want to try and avoid like cliche wording or phrases that people have heard before, like I'm the most ambitious person you're ever gonna hire. It's good to say that you are ambitious, but try to say it in a way that's not, over egotizing yourself and keeping it down like, yeah, I'm ambitious, I like doing things that are challenging, blah, 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 but don't try to cheese it up. That's not what they're looking for. So this next slide is just a bunch of, visual indications or examples rather, where you would be seeing, mistakes on somebody's resume. So, instead of multitasking, they put multitasting. He said there, sir or madman, instead of madam. I'm anxious to use my exiting skills. Probably not anxious to use your exiting skills. It's not good to put on your resume. Public instead of that. Attaching instead of attacking. I think you guys kind of get the idea, obviously. But then, this guy says he has attention to detail, but then has attention to detail here again. So obviously repeating yourself when you're listing your skills is not ideal. Huh? He really wanted to emphasize it, but that might not be the one you want to emphasize since it's specifically talking about paying attention to the smaller details. But yeah, maybe this guy was just like really, really shooting for it. So yeah, these are just some, an overall of like what not to do in a resume. I think we're all familiar with what not to do in a resume. Let me move this on over. All right, so 6 seconds. Can anybody tell me the importance of 6 seconds when we're talking about resumes? Christine, she's got the experience, correct, yes. There was a study done by this group called The Ladders in 2011 that tracked eye movement of 30 recruiters over a 10-week period. And what they found was resumes get an average of 6 seconds of attention. So sure, we are spending a bit over an hour on something that takes up about 6 seconds of space in their time. So why? Resumes are important because they're how you market yourself. It's your professional you on paper and the collateral you can share with others. It is also the standard for companies' applicant tracking system, or ATS, And even in 2016, a resume remains a job search constant. A one-page synopsis of your skills and experiences that can be distributed digitally or a hard copy is very important in many regards. So it's important that you have a resume and not just any resume or any good resume, but you want a great resume. So having an authentic, well-crafted, clear resume sets the foundation for a strong job search, and how you use that resume and assuring you are applying to the right positions with that resume is also another topic of discussion. And so speaking on that 6 seconds, essentially what we're looking at here is just kind of like a breakdown of that latter study. So it's kind of hard to visually interpret what's going on, but essentially what you can see is this left side, it's kind of obfuscated by all the heat maps, but you could see in the non-organized resumes, they kind of spend time trying to like figure out like, is this where I'm looking for? Or maybe this is it over here. And they're like looking at the margins for some reason. And, they're like, they don't really ever make it down to this bottom part. But what you can see here is when it's perfectly sectioned off. So we have this, synopsis of who you are and why you're in this field. And then we have professional experience. You could see that the heat maps for their eyes gradually go down the page from section to section, and it makes it a lot easier for them to visually see very quickly. Not only that you're organized by sectioning off your resume with relevant sections and topics, but that you're also making it easier on them to evaluate whether you're a good candidate for the job or not. So we want to have all of our relevant information above the fold. Are we familiar with that term? Can anybody explain what that means or where that originates from? Yes, like a newspaper, exactly. So when we're talking about above the fold in regards to a resume, what we're meaning is we want all of your really important, pertinent information on the top half of your resume. So it would be above the fold, essentially, where the most important things you want them to know right away are in the top half of your resume. So that's what we mean by we want your resume to be above the fold, because we want it to stand out within seconds of the recruiter laying their eyes on it. So, is it aesthetically pardon me? Is it aesthetically pleasing? Pleasing. So, as far as talking about aesthetically pleasing, you want your technical resume to be one page per 15 years of work experience. So if you've been in the field for a while and you have a ton of experience, you want to include that all. Generally, you want to keep one page to 15 years. And if you have another page of 15 years of experience, then of course you can, create that second page. But generally, I'm guessing that not a lot of us have more than 15 years of experience. So you really want your resume to only be one page. Obviously, standard margins, the margins we're looking for should be about like 10 to 11 point. And we want to use type or fonts that are, pardon me, we want to choose a pardon me. We want to choose a font that is classic and readable, like Arial, Baskerville, Didot, Georgia, Helvetica, or Times New Roman. We don't want to be doing Comic Sans. I'm sure everybody's heard that before. Making sure that your resume's font is in a professional format makes it a lot easier for them to evaluate you as a candidate. Black font color, you might be able to get away with like a dark blue. You want it to be really reserved and not like absolutely outlandishly outstanding, so that, or you have like the font color is yellow, your background's blue, your boxes are green. We don't want it to look like that. We want it to look like very concise and like it was professionally made. So black is maybe not explicitly required, but very, very dark colors, if you're trying to do some like color theming on your resume, helps a lot. Labeled sections, we'll be going into that. Reverse chronological order, obviously what that means is as far as listing your experiences and your education, you want the most relevant, the last thing you did to be the top. And then as you keep listing your experience, it obviously gets farther and farther away from the current present time. So that's reverse chronological order, where we're listing the most recent events first and then going down and talking about the older stuff that we did. And then of course, consistent punctuation and nomenclature. Going back to, making sure that everything is spelled correctly and that all the grammar is correct. These are all important in making sure that your resume is aesthetically pleasing. So the first part of a resume is going to be your header. And so, of course, there's going to be a first and last name, a city and state in which you live, a phone number, email address, hyperlinked URL to your GitHub profile, and a hyperlinked URL to your professional LinkedIn page. And so I also want to take this moment to let you guys know that when you're saving your resume or submitting your resume, you should be doing it in a PDF format. This is what will allow recruiters and interviewers alike to open your resume and actually be able to click on the hyperlinked URL. When you print it out, maybe you want to change the hyperlink color to blacks just so they're not like, what the heck is going on here? But as far as when you're applying online, you want those URLs to be clickable when they open it. And the way you do that is by exporting your resume as a PDF. And you'll get a visual indication of like what this all means. I just want to give you guys, an overview of what we're looking for as far as building your resume, at least the way Galvanize wants it. Okay. Technical resume includes 2 sections, skills and projects not found on a traditional resume. So as developers, we kind of have like a different sort of resume that we're going to be doing. It's not the typical one that you're used to. We're going to be listing 2 different things instead of like, experience or just flat out skills. So as far as skills, your resume does not tell an employer everything that you have ever done. Your resume tells an employer what you will do for them. So you only want to list your technical skills as far as like, JavaScript, CSS, HTML, jQuery, SQL, Postgres, all those sorts of things. That would end up in your actual like skills section in your resume. And once again, we'll get a visualization on that for you guys here in a second. But for now, we're just going over just kind of the requirements of and what you would be expected to have on your resume as a web developer. So skills, you list all the technologies you use, the ones that you feel confident in and that you've used before and have really good experience with. Projects is the next section. So this is a little bit different. I'm sure not a lot of us are used to having projects on our resumes, but essentially what you want to do is you have the title of your project, you have a URL, so maybe if it's deployed, that's great. That's a super bonus points if you can have a deployed URL instead of your GitHub. It's not the end of the world if you put GitHub as the project URL, but it's just that much better if you actually have a deployed program or application where they can just click on it and they're looking at like the production environment of your application. That's gonna speak a lot more than them just going to your repository and being like, oh, well, there's 100 commits here and I can see who's doing this and that, but then they would have to, clone it to see what you're actually doing. If you can actually get it deployed, that's like super duper bonus points. And then of course, as far as your project, you're gonna say when you started and whether it's finished or in progress. And if it is finished, you wanna say the date that you finished it at. And so there's also going to be a short description of the project, like why you made it, who's it for, what does it do, the technologies you use to build that project, and your role on a team if applicable. Most of us are building projects solo, so you probably don't need to worry about that, but in the future, you would also want to include what you did on that project, especially if it was a big enterprise project, so that people know exactly what you did to help achieve this project and becoming like a 1.0 and making it so that it's deployable. And lastly, you want your experience towards the bottom of your resume. And so this is actually going to be a little bit more simplified. When I was going through the cohort, my resume had like a very giant chunk under every single job that I've had where I just like listed out all of the responsibilities and the requirements and all that. What I was told to do in my cohort is not get rid of the non-relevant career information, but to kind of like change it in a way that coincides with like the tech industry as a whole. So I used to be a massage therapist at Phoenix Sky Harbor, and when I'm applying for jobs, that was my most relevant recent professional experience. So I was talking to our past career lead before Nick came on, and she was telling me, well, instead of saying, you were working with clients in the airport and you had to go through security, blah, 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 she would say, find the aspects of that job that you would find pertinent to the tech industry and just write a really small summary on basically how that job experience would fit into the tech role. So instead of me going on about, oh, I would have to do like all these different techniques on different clients and, focusing on trigger points and all that, what I did was I refactored it. So it was like I regularly led a team in a spa where we had, a bunch of things that needed to be done. I'm kind of paraphrasing. This isn't actually how it's written, but and when the things needed to be done, I was kind of the managerial position where people would refer to me and check to make sure that, like, hey, am I okay to do this? Is now the time to do this? Um, and it kind of shapes that job experience in a way where it's no longer talking about this really niche, massage therapy industry. It's talking about I had this experience in this niche industry, but the skills I learned there can translate to the tech industry.
The thing that I always looked for that my boss wanted looking at resumes was 3 bullet points with relevant work experience previously that would be applicable to the job now. So like growth, how much you grew in a job, if you were promoted through the company, if you led a team or worked on a team, and if you helped the company in any sort of way while your position was there. So like even if like say you're running a team, you're at a restaurant and sales were up by 1% that month, you want that on your resume saying like helped team grow profits in company. Like that makes you look like, oh well, what did he do? And you can talk BS about that. Like, oh, I streamlined the way that we sat people while I was a hostess. Like, okay, you probably didn't, but saying that looks good on your resume.
Yeah. What were the other two?
Growth, it's like the impact of your work, if you were leading in a team or on a team, how you worked in the team, and the like percentages of growth look good on your resume. Like we went like the last project for my previous job, we went from like having 2 real estate partners to like 20. So like being able to say like increased real estate relationships by X% looks good. Even if you went from 2 partners to 2 partners, then you can say you grew exponentially. And saying something like that makes it look good. Yeah. So action words.
Yeah.
And like finding things that are like integrated new systems, managed an office, like words like that make you sound smarter.
Yeah.
And, like I was a receptionist and I made it sound like I ran the office. I did.
Yeah.
That wasn't my job title.
Yeah, even if it's not your job title, I had the same thing. So like, even though my job title was still like spa coordinator, I regularly found myself in managerial positions where I had to make executive decisions. And so even if your job title doesn't necessarily pertain to, being a manager as your job title, if you did stuff that was relative to managing people or networking and connecting, like that's super pertinent information that employers care about, even if it's like you were working at McDonald's and you were like, I had to, constantly, improve the blah, 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 blah. McDonald's is probably a bad example, but you guys kind of get what I'm saying, where you're just shape shifting the job description so that it fits the tech industry requirements rather than just posting it up there as is. And we'll get a visual example up here in a second, as I said. Speaking of action words, that's actually the next slide. So this is an example of some. They're just generally, I mean, it's like action words. Like if you want to look into more action words, you can just Google it. I actually have a list up here for you guys to take.
The best way to write it is action word and then action that you did, like on your resume. Like mine is like created custom websites, integrated new systems,
Yeah.
managed an office. So like having that action word gets them a reference of what you did very, very quickly versus like I worked at a place and managed. Like having it first makes it easier for someone to quickly glance over it and be like, oh wow, they have all these skills.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's kind of what we're looking for. Like, it's not the absolute end all be all, but trying to be as concise as possible while delivering the most pertinent information is really, really key as far as writing your resume and reviewing your resume. So these are some action words. I also have a list that I could show you guys after. And so finally, education is going to be at the bottom of your resume, and it's just going to be very, very simplistic. It's just going to be the name of your school, where it is, how long you were there, and what kind of degree or degree certification you received as well. Very, very basic. So yeah, Galvanize is a critical component of your technical brand. Add it to your education section. Don't forget. So before I continue on to the other examples, are there any questions about anything we just covered? Clarence? Yeah, Christine, Christine says three, so I'm going to refer to her. But
I
um,
give three most recent, and if not most recent, most pertinent. So like my little brother might be applying for a job, and he had like one job in high school. So trying to find out of his friend's resume was like he was in the like honors, whatever. He led student council at school, and like he could say he did really important things there. And then he could put his student job that or his job he had during school, and then now he works at like a pump it up over the summer. So those are the three things he's gonna have on his resume when he goes to apply for places for a job in Tucson University of Bay. But like those three things are the most recent and the most pertinent. So like forever I had volunteer experience on my resume because I worked as a hostess and then I worked like at Toby Keith's, which like, I didn't want on my resume. And
yeah.
then I was a volunteer at like a soccer program. So I put the volunteer work there instead of saying that I was, a bar girl because I didn't want that on a professional resume.
Yeah. To add on to that too, like you want to really try and get like your experience as close to the current date as possible, but if it's not information that you feel like you could like shape shift into working into the technology industry, I would omit that for the time being and just move on to your next work experience. But typically, like Christine said, you want like you want like three references to professional experience, but then you also really want to make sure that you can take that experience and change it in a way that matches the technology industry. What? Okay. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, so in that specific example, for the painter, what you might be able to do is instead of being like, I was contracted by this company to go to these different clients' houses and we had to make sure that we were using the right color palette, what you could do is instead omit all of that information, you could say, I worked with a coordinated team of people achieving, a collective goal where we were trying to get things done as quickly as possible. Communication was key on the team, and we all worked together in a fluid environment where we prioritized our own specific roles. Like that's a way where you could kind of like shape shift that painting job into something that sounds like it's more of a fit for the tech role. And then maybe even delivery, you could say, I had to abide by a very strict schedule and I had a ton of responsibilities where I needed to make sure that these actions were taken at the right time and on time and all that stuff. Like those are ways that you can kind of switch it around. So even though it's not a technology job, it still showcases that you have skills that are relevant to the technology industry. Good questions. So yeah, I actually have, and I will Slack this out to you guys. This is a copy of essentially what was given to me, and now this doesn't need to be exactly what it looks like, but you can see kind of what we were going over. We have our name and our GitHub all linked on the top here, and then we have a summary of essentially what brought you here. This kind of touches on it a little bit. This is what, pardon me, this is where you enter your why plus part. Speaking of typos, I think that's meant to be past. So this is where you enter your past, present, and future statements. So, the way I did mine was I said, I've always been fascinated with technology. I first got into technology at the age of 9. I built my computer at 12. And then, I proceeded to enroll in Galvanize and so on and so forth. Like you kind of tell your story in the summary as long as it's relative to like the technology industry. You don't want to be like, I spent the last 20 years as a lumberjack and now I'm ready to rock and roll in JavaScript. It's not going to really stick out to any employers. And so now you can see down here as well, we have the relevant skills. These are all things that we're going to be learning, except maybe Angular, but I know for a fact we're going to be learning React, Java, MongoDB. There are skills here. So, and this is going back to above the fold. This would be considered above the fold right here. Is you can see very quickly that it's sectioned off. They have a synopsis about who you are, and quickly at a glance, they can see what skills that you're offering to the table. And then below the fold, that's where you can include things like your projects, and we can kind of see this example here. Can everybody see this? We good? Cool. Yeah. So you have your project title and the GitHub link or where it's deployed, the description, and the technologies used down below. And you would kind of segment that off in that way. Education is going to be whatever education that you have received. If Galvanize is the only one, you can go ahead and put Galvanize there. You can also put, if you went to other vocational schools or if you had some time at a university, you can certainly put that in there as well. But I would say you'd probably want all of the web development, developer, software engineer, relevant education towards the top. And then finally, you can see down here, we have our professional experience. And instead of it being this very long, summary of what you did there, it just says recommended improvements to supply ordering and inventory management that increased efficiency and lowered costs, saving approximately $5,000 annually. So even in that example, we can hear the action words. It's very pert and to the point. We can quantify the effect that they had for the company, and it's a very effective single sentence that encapsulates how your experience at that job can pertain to the technology industry. And then down here, office assistant, organized logistics, led major donor communications, and contributed to marketing materials to help generate up to $1.5 million per event. And this is all on one page because we do not have 15 years of experience yet. So I will Slack this all out to you, just so you have, that kind of skeleton to work off of, example to work off of. And yeah, I'll get this out to you guys. So this is another example. This doesn't necessarily abide by our criteria that we set, but I just wanted to show another example of what another one might look like. I wanted to show that it's okay to have color. It's okay as long as it's aesthetically pleasing and it's not distracting. It's okay to have very slight aesthetic changes to your resume, but again, you really don't want to go overboard and you want to try and make sure that it doesn't distract away from what's actually written on your resume. You want it to kind of, link together so that, one thing I've seen people do is like here, they'll have like a very faint like underline with like a fading color that looks like really professional, but it's not distracting because it brings your eyes there and you go, oh, this is the topic of the text I'm about to read here. Like small things like that are okay. But again, you don't want to go overboard. You don't want to be using like Comic Sans fonts. You want to make sure that The the aesthetics are professional first and far none. That's the most important thing. And then I have another list of action words in case you were ever if you've never heard this before, you can Google action words, resume action words, and this gives you just like a list of, it's kind of like a resume thesaurus where you get a bunch of synonyms instead of saying like, I helped something, you could say, I assembled something, I configured something, I debugged something. It gives you a little bit more verbosity in how you say what you impacted and how you built and so on and so forth. So action words are really important, and you want to try and get them in your resume as much as possible. Um, so here's another one that I have for you guys. So this doesn't necessarily pertain to you guys because right now we don't have a career coach, but when I was in my cohort, they gave us this list, and I still think it's kind of important to go over. And I will slack this out to you guys as well. But essentially, they wanted us to go over like if you find a company that you're interested in, they wanted us to list what do you know about them, what are their products, who's on their executive team, uh, do ample research to identify 7 to 10 talking points about this company before going into the interview with the company. This is very important so that you're set up in a way where you're not just blindly walking into the interview, not really having, the firmest grasp on what the company is or what they do. This helps a lot with just kind of setting the stage before you even interview with like what might be addressed or what needs to come up. So things they must know about me. Um, these are my questions about them, the company itself, like how is the CEO doing so well? It's crazy. And then, my team, pardon me, what kind of work environment can I expect? Those sorts of questions. What's going to be my role? Will it be mentorship? Am I going to be working on the back end? Those sorts of things. These are all bullet pointed for you to fill out so that you can kind of conceptualize and really think through like, what do I need to make sure I'm prepared for the interviewing process? And then star stories, of course. People know what star stories are? We get a hand. Star stories. General idea. Okay. So essentially, star stories. I should have them up. I do. So star stories are broken down in the situation, task, action, and result. Result. So that's what STAR actually stands for, is situation, task, action, and result. And so if I come over here real quick, you can see we've probably heard these questions before. So this would be a STAR story. Tell me about how you worked effectively under pressure. Like I'm sure we've all heard like a similar interview question in the past. And then of course they have a sample of how you would answer this in a STAR story format. And once again, like Google's a great resource if you wanted to look more into like, more STAR questions and more STAR examples. They're definitely out there. That's what I did to pull this up. How did you handle a challenge? Give an example. Have you ever made a mistake? How did you handle it? Give an example of how you set goals. These are kind of like open-ended questions that interviewers tend to ask that really give you the opportunity to go into detail about how you handle problems, and they're listening for the way you fix the problem. They're listening for the way that you frame the problem, and they want to make sure that you have a concise way of answering this question that doesn't just trail on forever as well. So star stories are important too. If you are about to interview, I would just Google, common star stories. You can get a look at these and then you can start building your star stories based on that. Going back, I'm also going to be slacking out this document. This is what we had to use in order to pass our mock interview. I'm sure when we have our career coach, she'll be scheduling mock interviews with you guys, but I'm going to make sure to get this out to you guys so you can see exactly what and we had access to this too, so it's not cheating or anything like that. But this is exactly what they're going to be grading you on and the criteria of like what they're expecting. So, hygiene, eye contact, your attire, is your body language good, the ability to engage the interviewer in delightful dialogue. And then, of course, tell me about yourself, what attracted you to this company, what interested you in this role. all of these down here, this kind of gives you like an idea of the questions that the mock interview are going to be asking. And then these down here are actually just for me. Like these were specific questions that were asked in my mock interviews. So you might have different questions as far as the ones that aren't in bold down here. But this is essentially how your mock interview would play out. And this is what you could probably expect once we get our career coach in and he starts scheduling mock interviews with you guys. Finally, I can't emphasize enough how important meetups are. And I don't know if you guys have heard about AZ Devs, but it's essentially this Arizona collective of developers in one Slack channel. And if we go over there, you can see there's 1,122 people in the Slack channel, and it's always talking about meetups. You can come over here, jobs, and people constantly, not from a recruiter, blah, 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 looking for da, 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 da. Anybody in ASU knows somebody who knows React. The company I'm working for is hiring ASU students, da, 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 da. Like, this is a really great opportunity to not only look at this jobs board, but also announcements has a ton of meetups, and meetups are super, super important. I definitely recommend at least trying to go to two. Funnily enough, I got these free AirPods by going to a meetup, USAA. So, I mean, all things said and done, I came out on top on that one. But this is a great, great Slack channel to just constantly be getting hit with, hey, this meetup's going on. Hey, this other meetup's going on. Maybe people are interested in this meetup. You can see like Tech Talent Select Meet and Greet, Node AZ, another meetup. Like, these are super important because when you're actually going there in person and you're talking to the interviewers and recruiters, they can put a face to the resume. And if you make a really good impression and you have a physical copy of your resume, um, more often than not, like 90% of the time, you can at least get some contact information and they'll hand you their business card and say, hey, yeah, maybe we could talk some more, instead of you just like sending out a ton of resumes on LinkedIn, never hearing anything back. Wondering what you're doing wrong. Meetups are a great way to actually just get out there, talk to the people that are hiring, see what they're looking for, and just get an idea of what the tech industry in Arizona looks like right now. So I can also Slack this out. You need an invite, but pretty much all you need is like an email. I've never heard of anybody being rejected. So as far as requesting an invite, I don't know what this is going to look like. There you go, GitHub. So they'll invite you with your GitHub, and you can get rocking and rolling in that Slack channel. It's really, really great, especially as far as looking for jobs and networking and connecting with people. Are there any questions about anything I talked about? Clarence? I don't have references on mine. Let's take a look. Yeah, I don't think references are necessarily explicitly required. I didn't have any references on my resume, and that never really was a problem. I had a couple offers lined up before Galvanize reached out to me, and my resume didn't have any references on it. If they're interested in references, they can always ask you, like, hey, do you have your list of references that we can call and ask? And at that point, you could give it to them. But I don't think it's explicitly required on your actual resume, especially since we're trying to fit all of our content on one page. I don't think omitting references is a bad idea. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm actually going to stop the recording now because I'm going to go into my LinkedIn and show you guys what's up. Let's see.